This is B2B Enablement, a Klyck.io podcast created to inspire sales and marketing leaders navigating digital transformation. I'm your host, Dave Carr, and on this show, we'll share actionable insights to build winning digital strategies and deliver better sales results with your customers. Well, hello everyone, and welcome to episode number 21 of B2B Enablement. And today we've got a really fun topic to talk about. We're going to talk about how to establish a culture of data inside your organization. And so if you're like most B2B companies, data is always top of mind. How you capture it, how do you apply it, and more importantly, how do you monetize it? And the challenge I think a lot of us get into is that there is fantastic technology available to help us capture that data, but technology is only valuable if the people in the organization are actually using it and allowing it to guide the company to achieve their goals. So with me today, I have Nick Amabile, and he is the CEO of DOS42, a total expert in the realm of data, much more than I am. And I'm really looking forward to having a conversation with him about how to create a culture of data inside your organization. So I'll give Nick just a couple of seconds here to do a quick intro, and then we'll hop straight into the topic.
Awesome. Hey, Dave. Thanks for having me on. Really excited to be here. Yeah. So, DOS42 is a boutique data and analytics consulting firm, and we help businesses of all sizes and different industries, as you said, really use data throughout their organization. I mean, especially with the move to digital, everything that you do these days has data. Of course, for B2B companies, it's mostly focused on sales, but also if you're in the manufacturing industry, you can think about inventory and manufacturing and supply chain. So this is all real complex stuff. But at the end of the day, we at DOS42 help our customers really make sense of all this in a much more simpler way than it sounds. So really excited to be here and kind of explore the topic today with you, Dave.
Yeah, that's great. Well, and you guys would know as well as anybody the challenge that just exists in, creating data is the easy part. And I think that especially with the advent of so many systems, we can all do that. It's interpreting it and putting it to work. So, we'll probably have listeners that are on all ends of the spectrum. You may be doing a pretty good job with data in your organization. You may just be getting started. So let's just begin at the most elementary level. Like, what is causing and driving this big focus on data in organizations? And what sort of trends are you seeing recently around that?
Yeah, so like I kind of mentioned, I think one of the major trends is just the move to digital, and that could be everything from digital marketing to direct to consumer and e-commerce. A lot of our companies are in a transition period, but also modern businesses today have, numerous SaaS applications that they use, whether that's for their ERP, for their billing, like I said, for supply chain manufacturing. So all these different, SaaS applications create data silos, which basically means that your supply chain data can't talk to your customer data and that kind of thing, right? So really that's a key trend that we've been seeing. And I mean, even for our business, which is, 60 something people, we use, 30 or 40 different SaaS applications. We face this challenge just as much as anyone else. And so the first step on any kind of data and analytics project is really understanding the business goals. So we like to say that at DOS42, we're not an IT services firm. We are a business consulting firm. And it's really about understanding, okay, what are the sales motions? What does the go-to-market look like for our customers? How do they make money? Just all these basic things that we try to understand. And then we take our lens of, just industry experience, best practices, and try to work backwards to a technical solution. I think a lot of times when folks are taking on data projects, they start from the opposite side. They start from the technology first and then move to the business side of things last. And then they sort of figure out, okay, why is this not meeting my business needs? Well, it's because you started with the wrong priorities first. So if I can offer one tip to everyone out there is certainly to start first with the business goals and then work backwards to a technical solution and not the other way around.
It's funny to hear you say that, Nick, because I think I have probably given this example like 3 or 4 times on the podcast before, but like throwing technology at a problem, and the classic case of, hey, we've got to fix something. We need more data. We need whatever, fill in the blank, marketing automation. So you just go get a system and you pay for it and you don't have a strategy, you don't have a plan, and then it ends up wrecking, and then you blame the system and everybody gets angry. So, So talk to us maybe a little more around, if you're a business and you're starting down that journey, granted, you've already kind of covered the most important point. You got to think about your business priorities. What steps beyond that does a company start to take when they think about, hey, what technology do I need to implement? And then how do I make that work as a cohesive system?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And I mean, as you mentioned kind of at the top of the show here, there's so much data technology and analytics technology out there. In fact, there's an industry report coming out called the landscape of data and analytics, and it has 1,000 different logos and vendors on there from software companies. And this is basically what our customers at DOS42, they're facing that challenge, right? They're trying to figure out, what does each thing do? What is the overlap? How do they work together? So on and so forth. But really what we do is we start technology agnostic. What we start with is centralizing data in one place. And so typically that looks like a data warehouse. That could be anything from like a Snowflake, which a lot of folks have heard about due to the recent IPO, Redshift, which is an Amazon Web Services product, so on and so forth. There's a bunch of different ones, and it doesn't really matter which one you choose. I mean, of course, we have opinions on technology, but at the end of the day, the goal is to get the data in one place. So that's taking your supply chain data, your customer data, your sales data, inventory data, all in one place so that you can sort of join it together and create really a 360-degree view of your business. That's the first step. The second step then is to actually create business meaning out of that data. And so typically that could be like a semantic layer, that could be data marts, what basically translates rows and columns and tables and database concepts into more of like a business concept, like customers, orders, etc. And so that's really the key piece. And I used to work as the head of business intelligence at Jet.com, which is a big e-commerce company that got sold to Walmart. And the challenge that I faced in my career is having different numbers for the same metric. So if you ask somebody, hey, how many orders do we have yesterday? You're going to get 10 different answers from 10 different people. And that's really frustrating, right? Because then people are arguing about, is your number right? Is my number right? Whatever. And it's not about what should we do about this? Like what is the insight or what is the action that we should be taking? So that's a real critical step right there.
It's interesting you start talking about all the different silos and teams working together. I would really like to get your take on thoughts around how you structure a team around data. And, I know that, having more business analysts or more data analysts and even now data scientists is becoming really popular in organizations. I think B2B is still lagging a little bit in that. But what are your thoughts? I mean, how have you seen the best organizations handling it from a team?
Yeah, it's a really good question. And I think we actually have a blog on this that we can link to in the show notes. But there's a couple of different methodologies to structure teams. And as you said, there's a lot of confusion, I think, in the industry, too, about titles, like what's a data scientist versus an analyst versus a data engineer. But generally, there's a couple of different methodologies to structure teams. And one is a centralized team, and the other, on the other side of the spectrum, is a decentralized team. And for most companies, a centralized team is a great place to start. And really, depending on size and other things, but it becomes really efficient to have one team that kind of has a single view of what's going on. And that team can start small. I mean, typically we see a lot of our customers, in the B2B world are on the small side of the scale, starting with just like a finance analyst, for example, somebody who really knows the business very intimately, maybe prepares forecasts and other things like that. So they know the business drivers. And they know the data sets quite well. It's really about enabling those folks then with the right technology to do what they do better and faster. So, but centralized is really a good way to start. And you don't need to start very large. You can start with just a few data analysts is kind of what I would say. Folks who are proficient in like SQL queries and business intelligence tools. It doesn't have to get super complicated. And especially these days, a lot of the technology out there is really self-service and really easy to maintain. It's all cloud-based, so it's not like you're going out and making a huge IT investment right off the bat, buying servers and all this kind of complicated stuff. But that's really where we come in and help a company, right? If you have a small analytics team who maybe is not super technical, maybe they have some basic SQL queries or SQL skills, we can come in and really accelerate that, set up the foundation, and then help them leverage the tools more efficiently.
Yeah, no, I think those are great thoughts. And one of the things, I always try to reiterate, and this is for all topics we talk about on the podcast, is just the importance of starting small and taking, meaningful steps over time. And I'll give you a real life example. My former employer, I ran marketing for a company called Mayer Electric. They're one of the largest electrical distributors in the U.S. And, in that organization, we were right around $1 billion in revenue. And we started with just one individual, and it was just a killer. I mean, this was like a data Jedi guy. His name was Scott Wagner. If Scott is listening, then kudos to you, man. You've always done such a great job. But Scott was our go-to guy to really help us pull all of that together and our analytics and what all that meant, because we were looking across like an ERP. We had Oracle and JD Edwards, and then we had Domo as our BI tool. So I think, no matter where you are, and again, that's an example from a billion with a B dollar company that's using just one person and then kind of stepping into that. So I think that there is a continuum, and no matter how big or small you are, there is a way to start small and work up.
Yeah, and I'll just say, I mean, when we go into companies and do projects to set these tools up and kind of set these processes up, we always focus on one use case. We start with one thing. And so, like you said, it could be taking the ERP data and joining it with, I don't know, customer data or whatever it is, or transaction data in a different light, right? So it's always one or two high value use cases that we really focus on first, as opposed to, hey, we're going to boil the ocean here with all these different data sets, all the different things that you might want to do. But really, it's also about that adoption piece, right? Once folks kind of understand the power of what data can do for them, they get really excited. And then all the other teams that maybe, weren't a part of that first use case are like, hey, I want that. How can I get that, right? And so that gets the momentum going, because a lot of times you just don't have that if you're, taking 6 months or a year to deliver a project or deliver some business value. So that's what we focus on, is really quick time to value.
There you go. Well, I think that's a good lead into the next question I had, which is around when you see companies take these first steps and you're implementing technology and new platforms and new processes, what are some typical road bumps that you've seen with organizations where they have challenges, and what are some suggestions about how to minimize those in your business?
Yeah, it's really those two things that I kind of hit on earlier, actually. It's just starting from the business use cases, identifying one or two high value use cases, and really making sure that you're able to knock that out of the park end to end. So it doesn't mean, delivering something end to end basically means, in my view, getting it into the hands of business users who are non-technical, right? Because that's really the key at the end of the day. Like you mentioned, Dave, that you're in marketing, right? You know a lot about marketing for the company that you're working at, right? You probably know a lot more than me. If I was a data analyst, you know a lot more about marketing and what you want to do. So it's really about enabling folks in the marketing department, the sales department, the finance, supply chain, whatever it is, enabling them to ask and answer their own questions. That's really the goal. And then you have to start from figuring out what does your day-to-day look like? Are you spending time in Excel or downloading data from different marketing tools or CRM tools and kind of merging it all together by hand, right? So understanding kind of what the current processes look like today, understanding with an expert like folks at DOS42, we can come in and say, here's exactly where we can plug in data and analytics to make you more effective as a marketer or as a salesperson, rather than somebody from technology or IT saying, hey, like this is the latest shiny object that we want to install here for you guys. So.
Yeah. Well, and I like what you had to say too about, whoever the users are, and the further you can get down the chain, the more important. Because then, I mean, if you, the real win is if you can get field level salespeople to start buying into technology, then you have hit the holy grail, man, because good luck getting that far down. And believe me, I've seen it with CRM systems and sales enablement, which is what my company does. But the further, like you said, you can get down and provide value to those people. And what I think really becomes the fun part, and maybe this is just because I'm a data nerd too, but when you start figuring out, hey, what is it you need to know to do your job better? And then even if you, as an analyst or a data scientist or whatever, have no idea what that's about. So you may not know anything about my marketing strategy, but understanding where the data needs to come from and plug into the system to help me do my job better or help a salesperson to do their job better. I think that's where the real magic starts to happen.
Yeah, well, this reminds me of a story from a customer of ours. We went in, and they're actually a B2B, sales company. They actually make sort of access control products for commercial buildings, like residential buildings and other commercial buildings. And they had sales folks who would call up a customer, a QBR type motion or something like that, where they would review the account with the customer and say, hey, how do you like the products? How is it sort of helping you out? And a lot of times the salespeople would get blindsided because they didn't realize that the customer had opened like 10 different, tickets with this customer support team saying like, this thing is broken, it's not working, I can't figure it out, whatever it was, right? So the salesperson would call the customer up saying, hey, are you ready for that contract renewal? Do you want some more product? And they're like, no, like I have 10 tickets that you guys haven't answered. What's going on? So the salesperson was completely blindsided by this, right? And so like one of the things that we've done for that customer and for other customers is kind of create this customer health dashboard. So a salesperson, when they're calling on a customer, can have all the information about this customer in one place. And again, like that's a really good example where we have data coming in from a CRM system, data coming in from some customer service, help desk type system, plus the contract data and all that kind of stuff appearing in one place. So the customer now has, or the salesperson has everything about that customer, excuse me, right in front of them when they call on the customer, and there's no surprises anymore. So that's one of my favorite stories of how data, to your point, really helps the folks on the front lines talking to the customers day in, day out.
That's a great example. And you're speaking my language as well, because what we do in sales enablement with our system at Klyck.io is collect information about customer engagements for the same reason, so that salespeople can have a better idea of what's going on in the buying cycle, how engaged someone is, what they're looking at, what content's resonating, all the way up to to the marketing level where you can start putting ROI to that. But the one thing that can break anything down, and no matter what system it is if the salespeople don't have a central place to go look at that. And so, whether it's Salesforce.com or wherever you're housing that interface to your sales team, that is extremely important into creating that sort of mindset and creating, as we talked about in the opener of the podcast, that culture of data. And so maybe that's a perfect segue, because I'm sure there's probably some people who have heard that term. It's kind of, it's kind of becoming a buzzword, like, you got to have a culture of data. But how would you define that? Like, what is a culture of data inside an organization?
Yeah, it's a really good question. I think it hits on a lot of the points that we've already discussed, which is, folks on the front lines who traditionally don't know how to program, don't know a lot about databases and other things like that, enabling them to ask and answer their own questions. So you may start out with kind of a centralized data and analytics team. Could be like one person, like we kind of talked about. You might start small. But really what you want to get to really have a data-driven culture is have this self-service model where now it's not just one person in the organization who's pulling reports and things like that. It's folks on the front lines being able to access these reports on their own without going through a centralized team. And you mentioned a really good point there, which is, a lot of times when we're working with customers, we identify these workflows and we figure out how to bring the data into the workflows versus how to get somebody from the workflow to some other tool, right? So if salespeople are already in Salesforce, what we want to do is bring the analytics and the data that we might be working on into Salesforce. So folks don't have to go learn a new tool or go, to figure something else out. The data is right there where they're already using on a day-to-day basis, the tools that they're already using. So that's one of the critical things. And, really when you think about adopting these new technologies and these new processes, because there is a big change management component to these types of projects, it's about using the carrot and not the stick, right? So we don't want to say, hey guys, we're shutting this thing down, you got to now go over here. It's like, no, we want to make it really easy for you. So it's like, this is something that now is the carrot, where it's going to be like this, your job is easier now. You're going to be more excited about, coming to work every day and more productive. And instead of taking 6 hours to manually put together this report or something like that in Excel with multiple sources, it's all automated, right? And so now folks are really excited about things. And that's really the key, is just get folks excited about the data and bring the data to where they're already working on a day-to-day basis, rather than kind of, hitting them over the head and say, now you have to go over here.
Well, the carrot approach always wins. And I have, I've been in a couple different organizations where we've done Salesforce.com implementations, and I've seen a spectrum, from, hey, we're going to mandate this, it's Big Brother, you're going to have to do it all, to, hey, we're going to take it very lightly and we're going to try to make it valuable. And I mean, every time it always goes better when you've got that carrot approach versus the stick approach. And, with all things data, and, we talked about like Domo, one of the systems that I had used in the past, the same thing there. We rolled that system out. At first, it was a real challenge to get anybody out of the C-suite to use it, or the VP level, right? Everything below that became a real challenge. But when you started providing value, it's like, well, hey, you can go in and look at all your sales pipeline. You can go in and look at all your, your margins or whatever, fill in the blank on your analytics. That's when it became valuable. And then people saw it as, a benefit to the way that they did they did business. I know you've given a couple of examples of just some tactical things you can do to start, reinforcing that culture. But at a just 30,000 foot level, if you are, an executive in a B2B company, you're listening to this podcast, what are some of the things you should be thinking about to start building that data culture?
Yeah, it's a really good question. I mean, it's really about, I think from a management perspective, really driving accountability and transparency. So in other words, everyone needs to be on that same sheet of music rather than sort of arguing about data and whose numbers are right. So, making sure that there's a governance process in place, that there's sort of everyone is clear on when we say orders or when we say sales or when we say customers, from a data perspective, exactly what does that mean? And that's actually a really big challenge. And it really has nothing to do with technology. Again, this is something that we go into a lot of organizations and we start talking to different business units. And multiple people will have multiple definitions for sales, orders, customers, whatever it is. In a lot of cases, a lot of them are valid and sort of correct if you're looking at it from a certain lens, but really being very clear about data definitions and governance is something that we come in and help our customers with. So even just defining what we're talking about, when we're talking about really basic metrics and KPIs, like you said, margin, that's kind of complicated one sometimes, right? Like what do we include in the margin calculation versus not, right? So just making sure that we're pretty crisp in an organization about what we're talking about when we're talking about different KPIs and metrics.
Yeah, getting that language aligned is so important. And, like with so many rollouts, you find that the devil, not only is it always in the details, but a lot of times it can be the simplest things too. Yeah. And just, making sure you've got those basic blocking and tackling done. How does an organization come to the decision around, do we need to go hire a consultant like somebody like DOS42 to come in and help us with this project? Yeah. Do we want to start it on our own? Do we bring somebody in the middle? How does that typically shake out? What are some of the things that would trigger someone to say we need help?
Yeah, it's a really good question. I mean, we talked about one, which is just the vast array of different technology vendors out there, and folks are kind of confused about what's the difference between Snowflake and Redshift. What does this product do for data science versus data analytics? So it's quite confusing. A lot of the terminology is confusing. So, technology selection is one, but I think even before we get into technology selection, most customers are already feeling some sort of pain point, if you will, right? And that's sort of a classic thing. Where, like I said, maybe you're preparing a weekly business report or something like that, and it's taking somebody on your team hours to do it a week, right? And maybe the numbers aren't as fresh as you'd like. So instead of doing, looking at the numbers on a weekly basis, you might want to look at it on a daily basis, right? Because a week could be too old to inform different decisions that you want to make. So kind of when you start to feel that pain, and I think, for smaller companies, to be honest, a lot of times Excel works quite well and sort of everyone knows what's going on. Everyone's on the same page because it's just the nature of small companies. But once that starts to break down and now we're not really sure what we're talking about or if the numbers are correct and just that sort of trust and transparency in data, that's when you might want to bring in a consultant like us. And I think one of the things that I'll say is, not only do we have kind of a pattern and an architecture that we've used many, many times to really accelerate these projects, the other thing I'd say is these projects don't actually take all that long. I mean, I think traditionally folks would say, hey, this is going to take 6 months or a year plus. We do a lot of projects in 12 weeks, and we get out of 12 weeks, we lay a foundation for the long term for our customers, and then get like a lot of the basic use cases out of the way. So like sales, customers, inventory, things like that. And that's a 12-week project. So, if we're talking about, when customers might want to bring us in is thinking about, hey, what are these pain points and what's the cost benefit of hiring folks, which is very difficult in the data and analytics world. I mean, we have to hire folks too. So hiring them, and then there's risks associated with that. Maybe they're good, maybe they're not, right? Maybe it's going to work out, maybe not. But from our perspective, we're an expert in these technologies. We're an expert in these type of projects. And we do them quickly to accelerate time to value for our customers. And we do it in a way that'll scale for the long term for them.
Yeah, and it's so difficult to internally to have to come to the conclusion to go spend money externally. And especially if you're a large organization and you say, okay, well, hey, do we just hire for this role? Do we reappoint somebody? But, I'm a firm believer in whatever you choose to do, and whether it's data analytics, marketing, sales, ops, fill in the blank. If you're not taking an approach where you're putting a person in place that can just live and breathe that full time, it's going to be a challenge. And that could be a reason to say, hey, maybe we need a third party that can really, really live and breathe this. Or maybe even if we have a person that lives and breathes it, but they don't have enough bandwidth and they need to supplement that with another organization.
That's right. And, I don't think these are mutually exclusive. It's not like hire an external team or don't hire an internal team, right? Really, like I said before, like I've been head of BI at different companies and I've built teams around this internally as well as a consultant. But on the consulting side, we want to pass it off to our customers, right? Like I firmly believe that every organization should have competencies and capabilities with data and analytics. So really what we're doing is laying a great foundation for then our customers and clients to take that over the long term, build a team against, and build that practice out. We're really just laying that foundation, best practices, the technical implementation, all that stuff is something that we do quickly, but we want to pass it off to our customers for the long term.
Yeah, great point. Well, as we get kind of toward the end here, one of the things I always try to ask my guests from a tactical standpoint, for somebody listening to this that wants to walk away and say, hey, what are some things I could do tomorrow inside my organizations? What are your top three? Where would you say, are the most important thoughts to leave people with?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think, the one thing is, we talked about it, is just start thinking about, what are your core KPIs and standardize those KPIs, even if it's, again, not even technical. Just make sure that you write it down and say, okay, this is what we mean when we talk about margin. This is what we mean when we talk about orders and sales. Get everyone on that same page and start thinking about governance. You have data in your organization. Start thinking about how you're going to govern it and manage it, and then try to make sure that you're able to get data to as many people as possible in your organization.
Great. Well, listen, I'm going to drop some links in the show notes for Nick's LinkedIn profile. If you want to reach out and connect with him individually, we'll also put some links to some of the resources that Nick mentioned around data analytics. We've got some as well, just some blogs and other resources that can help you understand more about how to use data, particularly when it comes to your sales and marketing activities. So we'll drop all of that in the show notes. But Nick, we really appreciate you taking time to join. And I could talk about this stuff for hours, but I certainly hope that all our listeners got something good out of this. If you're finding this podcast valuable, make sure to hit the like button or subscribe. Both of those are ways that we build our reach, and other people can help other people find us and continue to spread knowledge about B2B sales and marketing and data and all the other things. So, Nick, thanks so much for joining the show, and maybe we'll have you back again soon sometime.
Awesome. Thanks for having me, Dave. Really enjoyed it. Talk to you soon.